Preconditioning is a tool that producers can use by spending a little extra time after weaning to get these calves ready for market and hopefully get a higher price. Preconditioning consists of those calves have been weaned for at least 45 days. They're trained to eat out of a feed bunk, drink from a water trough. They've been vaccinated. They've been dewormed. They've been castrated if they were bull calves. They've been dehorned if they had any. And our heifers are all guaranteed to be open. When you first start considering preconditioning, one of the first things you need to slow down and think about is where are you going to put these calves? When we're talking about keeping calves for 45 to 60 days, that's a lot more space than what we would normally put in our corrals or holding pens. Do you have a small pasture that has a tough enough fence to handle weaned calves and be able to handle them 45 to 60 days? We're going to plan on feeding them out of a feed bunk, but having that forage option can not only save you dollars, but it's also a better option for those calves. Fence line weaning can be an option for your operation to decrease stress in the weaning period as a whole. At this specific operation, this group of calves were kept inside a corral that had full-scale cattle panels for a week. This gave them time to get used to not nursing. It gave their moms time to understand they weren't going to be right there with them all the time. And then a week later, they were turned into this pen. This pen, they can still see moms right next to the fence. They can talk to them. And it's been a very low stress process for everybody. Another plus of this specific setup is these calves can go straight from this back into that corral or handling facility when it's time to either move those calves or handle them or vaccinate or anything else we need to do. If you don't have access to a separate pasture for these calves, that's okay. You can make lot systems work. This is an example of calves that will be kept in a lot for 45 to 60 days. The biggest factor there is to make sure they still have plenty of quality hay and fresh water. As we supplement these calves with feed, it's important that we're meeting their requirements and achieve the growth goals that we want. If you need help balancing that ration, stay tuned for our final section in this series in 2 weeks where we'll talk about how to feed for preconditioning and still get the most bang for your buck. Another factor you have to consider is what are you going to do for water for these calves? Whether you're weaning 5 calves or 50 calves, nobody wants to haul that much water. You don't want to have to worry about dragging out water hoses and making sure they get put up. There needs to be a water system in that facility that you plan to keep your calves in. This is an example of a concrete water tank that was put in through the NRCS EQIP program. The great thing about it is it's an automatic tank. So we know that these calves are going to have access to fresh water all the time. There are several different options for water tanks, and as you're trying to figure out what to do, feel free to give us a call at the Extension office and we can talk about options. If you have questions about the EQIP program specifically, give Derek Noakes a call over at the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Feed bunks are another important aspect as we talk about feeding these calves for 45 to 60 days. These concrete feed bunks are really nice because our calves can't tear them up nearly as much. But there's lots of different options out there, and we can go through some of those individually if you need some help with those. There's lots of other options out there. If you've got questions about feeding systems, just give us a call at the Extension office and we'll be happy to talk you through some of those. Another point to keep in mind as you're getting these calves ready is some sort of identification system. Whether that's an ear tag for your personal farm or whether one of the preconditioning programs you're using has their own ear tag. This way you can track that calf, you know what that calf has received, and you'll be able to provide those records when you go to market these calves. Another important factor to consider is what kind of facilities do you have? Do you have some kind of squeeze chute or even a head gate that's going to make it more feasible to do things like castration and giving shots, possibly dehorning? These are all factors that you need to consider as you're planning for your preconditioning process. If you don't have a squeeze chute, there are some other options that may be easier. Maybe it's easier to band young bull calves that'll be less stressful for them and not require as big of a facility. It's okay if you don't have the fanciest equipment, but it's important to have a plan so that you can still achieve your goals. Another important factor for cattle buyers is that our calves have either been castrated if they were bull calves or if they're heifers that they're guaranteed to be open. When it comes to castration, you have lots of different options. These calves, for instance, have bands on. You can also surgically remove those testicles. These are things that we're going to cover next week in our session on Fridays on the farm if you've got questions about methods of castration. We've pulled these heifers off at weaning age, And as long as the only calves they've been exposed to that are males are these bull calves that we've already castrated, it's easier for us as producers to guarantee that they're open. Vaccinating our calves is another really important factor in preconditioning. The 3 things that our calves always need to be vaccinated for is some type of respiratory complex, Clostridia with blackleg, and Mannheim hemolytica. These are really important. Sometimes you also need these shots have to be boosted. One option that can be easier for producers is take time 2 weeks before you plan on weaning. Go ahead and work those calves, give them their first round of shots. You could go ahead and cut your bull calves. And then when you wean those calves, then it'll be time to give them those boosters. They'll be under less stress and they'll handle weaning a little bit easier. Some protocols may also ask you to use a modified live vaccine. These are great tools. Make sure you're taking time to read your labels. And if you have any questions about vaccination protocols, be sure to either give me a call or give your local veterinarian a call. Another important factor to consider when preconditioning is that these calves haven't received any antibiotics within their withdrawal time of the time you take them to market. Antibiotic withdrawal times will be clearly on the label, and they'll tell you how long you have to wait from the time you give that antibiotic until when you can slaughter that calf. There are also withdrawal times found on any of your wormers and your vaccines as well, so those are important to keep in mind. If you plan on pursuing the Go Green program, it's also important that they haven't received that last set of vaccines within 14 days of your sale date. As you're completing the preconditioning process, remember to keep your labels. Most of your paperwork is going to ask for things like the expiration date and maybe even the lot number, let alone the brand, and possibly your receipts from where you bought it. So keeping up with records is essential if you plan on doing a preconditioning program to help you market them at their highest potential. Another program you may be interested in is our Go Green program. This is the Natural State Preconditioned Calf program that is handled through Extension. And if you're interested in those, feel free to come by the office. We can get you signed up. We can even get you beef quality assurance trained if you need that. And we can get you some green tags and get you started with our Go Green program. Taking the time to precondition can mean a little bit more money and a little bit more resources and a little bit more time on the front end. But at the end of the day, it could mean a large profit margin. Right now, there's a large demand for calves that have been preconditioned. These calves may have lower costs for the buyer on the health side of the spectrum because they've already been vaccinated. They're through the most stressful period of their lives, which makes them easier for those buyers and cattle facilities to manage, so they're willing to pay a higher price for those calves. Producers can expect a premium for these preconditioned calves because by them putting the work in, it means that their next step of the operation won't necessarily have to. Preconditioned calves have better health results when they get to feedlots. They've been through the most stressful period of their lives, and so sometimes our buyers are willing to pay a little bit extra for that. As producers build a reputation for having high quality preconditioned calves, that'll help their reputation whether they're going through sale barns or private buyers, etc. But those buyers will start hunting those calves that they know are the quality that they're looking for. Another important aspect to think about is when you go to market those calves, make sure your buyers know that these are preconditioned calves. If you're going through a sale barn, call that barn owner the week before and tell them that you're bringing him 40 preconditioned calves that have been weaned for 60 days. Those are things they can tell their buyers, and they can work with you to get a higher price for those calves. Thank you for joining us for this week's session of Fridays on the Farm. Next week we'll talk a little bit deeper about castration and dehorning. See you next Friday.